I do think this is going to be a good one. So chat, let us learn about the town that inspired Silent Hill. Shall we?
Imagine driving into a ghost town entirely abandoned except for a few lonely residents. As you travel down a faded road covered in graffiti, steam rises from deep cracks in the grounds, creating an increasingly hot and foggy atmosphere. Despite what these eerie surroundings might suggest, you haven't just wandered into Silent Hill, nor are you characters in a B-list horror movie. This little slice of hell...
Okay, showing... Oh god, what was it called? Oh my god, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of that movie. That Stephen King movie. Maximum Overdrive. Thank you, Slygat. I totally blanked it. Yeah. Showing Maximum Overdrive as your choice for a horror movie is a choice. Yeah, no, not the nest. When they said, no, you haven't walked into a horror movie, this is a scene from Maximum Overdrive. One of the worst Stephen King movies ever made. Honestly, The Mist would have been a better choice as a horror snippet. Because there was no mist in Maximum Overdrive.
This little slice of hell is, in fact, Centralia. Tucked away in central Pennsylvania, about an hour northeast of Harrisburg and just as far southwest of Scranton, this small deserted town has been home to an underground mine fire that has burned for over 60 years. Today, we're going to delve into the haunting story of Centralia and its never-ending inferno. To say that Pennsylvania...
Yeah, Brandon, that's why I wanted to watch this, because I knew that Silent Hill was based upon this town. Not even the Silent Hill movie. I'm pretty sure the Silent Hill game, the entire Silent Hill franchise, was based off of Centralia, I believe. Or at least the first Silent Hill game was, and the movie, of course.
And the coal mining industry of an intimate relationship would be a bit of an understatement. The state contains about 95% of all the anthracite coal, also known as hard coal, found in the United States, making it virtually the nation's sole source of this rare resource. While other countries also possess anthracite reserves, the central and northeastern regions of Pennsylvania boast the largest known deposits in the world. Anthracite stands apart from other types of coal by being, rather simply, superior in pretty much every way. Thanks to its high fixed carbon content and low levels of volatile matter, it burns hotter, slower, and cleaner than other varieties. It's also denser and harder, making it highly prized for both industrial uses and heating. According to a 2022 report, Pennsylvania is home to 108 active coal mines, 80 surface mines, and 28 underground. Altogether, these operations produce about 40,000 tons of coal annually. However, less than 2,500 of those tons are the rare anthracite, which is mined in only 6 counties across Pennsylvania, including Columbia County. Now, coal mining first began in the region in 1842, when large deposits of the sooty substance were discovered in nearby Buck Mountain. Before long, both open-pit strip mines and underground operations have been established, giving rise to several mining towns, including Centralia. In 1862, the Centralia Colliery was founded, formalizing mining efforts in that area. Now, most of the town's residents found work with the Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company, which played a key role in Centralia's official incorporation in 1866. In the early years, Centralia flourished. The town boasted multiple hotels, 2 theaters, and 14 different stores. However, as anyone who has lived in a mining town can attest, such growth and prosperity are closely tied to the fortunes of the mining industry.
Yeah, I think that's not only coal mining, is, most prosperous small towns are heavily reliant upon industrialization. Factories, mines, oil drilling, all of these, what are considered prosperous towns. If the core industry that is responsible for so much money coming into the town goes away, that town literally becomes a fucking ghost town. Perfect example I can think of. There's a town in the southern suburbs of Chicago called Fort Heights. Fort Heights was called Fort Heights because it had a Ford plant in the town. I believe it was if memory serves, it was a production plant, a Ford car production plant. And basically the entire town existed because of the production plant. I don't recall how long ago it was, but the Ford production plant, basically the production plant part shut down. I think maybe there was some office work that was still taking place there, but like the production side of it shut down. Not long afterwards, the town of Fort Heights became the poorest town in the nation with one of the highest crime rates in the nation. The town of Fort Heights is literally nothing but drugs and gangs. It is one of the worst, most crime-ridden places in the country because the Ford plant shut down and all industry went away. The only thing that was left behind were the gangs and the drug dealers, and they just kind of took over the town. So that's what happens when you have a town that is dependent upon an industrial service to maintain itself. If that goes, it's why those towns are very fragile. And if that industry goes away, that town literally becomes a ghost town because no money is coming into the town anymore at that point.
When a town is built around a single market, its stability inevitably rises and falls with that industry's success. Unfortunately for Centralia, coal usage peaked during World War I and then steadily declined throughout the 20th century as the world shifted toward more cost-effective energy sources. As demand for coal diminished, the once bustling and promising town began a slow descent into decline. While Centralia boasted a population of over 2,500 residents in the 1890 census, that number had dropped to around 1,500 by the 1960s. The town's extensive network of underground mines was gradually sealed off, and many were abandoned entirely. Meanwhile, the open-pit strip mines, long since depleted, were left as gaping scars on the landscape, silent reminders of a potential that never fully materialized. This is a story all too familiar throughout the Commonwealth and indeed across much of the United States. In Pennsylvania alone, there are over 11,000 abandoned mines. And as a side note here, Pennsylvania is just one of 4 US states that is officially both a state and a Commonwealth. Either term is correct there. In these situations, there is often little that can be done. More often than not, residents are forced to seek new jobs and rebuild their lives elsewhere, leaving behind the towns
it is,
they
Leo.
once called home. Those who stay do their best to adapt, sometimes creating new forms of local economy with mining museums, unusual roadside attractions, or by repurposing old mines for entirely new uses. By 1962, the roughly 1,500 residents still living in Centralia and trying to keep the town alive began facing an entirely new problem. For decades, townspeople have been dumping their trash wherever they pleased, often using abandoned mines as makeshift landfills. This practice created multiple unregulated dumps throughout the area, leading to an infestation of rats.
Oh, God. If people are just dumping their trash there and no one's monitoring it, it's not just the rats. This is how fires can happen. I'm wondering if this is how the fire started. Because if you're just dumping trash, all it takes is a beam of sunlight hitting glass at just the right angle to basically do a magnifying glass effect and can start a fire. Yeah. Brandon, that's the other one. Decomposing trash, especially like wet trash, creates methane, and vacuum that is also flammable. This is turning into a tinderbox just waiting to go up. honestly.
And other vermin, and the pervasive stench became nearly impossible to escape. The Centralia Council, responsible for making decisions affecting the town, agreed that action was necessary, especially with Memorial Day festivities approaching. Although Centralia was no longer a thriving city, many residents still felt a strong sense of community pride. To address the issue, the council suggested a familiar solution, repurposing one of the town's old empty mining pits as a landfill. The pit they chose, originally excavated around 1935, measured about 75 feet wide and 50 feet deep. It had already served.
Cortana's, I recall seeing something a while ago. I don't know how correct it is or how factual it is, but I do think more than a few dumps do actually industrialize methane off of trash. What was the show? I think it was it was an old episode of Penn and Teller's Bullshit, where I forget the subject matter exactly, but there wasn't one place, it might have been California, I could be wrong about this though, where they were talking about, a landfill, that when a landfill gets full, they will basically put a layer of topsoil over it, and they'll actually like turn it into a park, but they'll also have methane harvesting set up for it that will basically run a turbine to create electricity. So it is like, but I do think, Cortez, I know what you're talking about. Like, there are several places that do it, but you're saying to industrialize it further, so more dumps get utilized in a way for harvesting methane. I believe that may be what you're saying, is that it should be done on a more widespread scale, which could be useful. Well, we can stop letting the hippies dictate the nuclear, the nuclear policy, and actually start using nuclear energy as a clean and safe method of power delivery. Like, nuclear energy is the cleanest, safest, and most efficient power delivery method currently available to humanity. And the fact that it still is not being utilized on a widespread scale is a fallacy. All the bitching and moaning that people have regarding electronic usage, all this shit with, electronic usages for crypto mining using so much energy, and, using, the whole thing about use electrical cars, it's safer for the environment, which is a fallacy, because while your car is not exuding CO2, the power plant that you are using to charge your vehicle is pumping out boatloads of fucking CO2 into the air. Or, that the more electric cars that are used and charged, the harder the power plants need to work, and they're just belching even more CO2 to try and keep up with the demand. So you're not actually saving the planet by driving an electric car. You're causing just as much of an environmental impact as the person driving a gas-powered vehicle. It's like, and so it's a fallacy. Now, if we started to convert all of the gas power plants, the coal power plants, if we started switching over to nuclear energy, then EVs actually would be environmentally beneficial, because the energy, the electricity that they're receiving to charge them would be coming from a nuclear power plant, which is clean burning energy.
There are nuclear reactors that use nuclear waste.
Oh yeah. Like, this is an absolutely viable and positive methodology to use that we will probably not see in our lifetimes. That's the reality of it. Barring some major cataclysmic event, we are not going to see the widespread use of nuclear energy replacing fossil fuel and coal burning energy plants in our lifetime. We won't, unfortunately. But we should. We absolutely should. Every time a person, I'm not even going to say what their job is, every time a person talks about let's save the planet, especially when it comes to burning fossil fuels, the very next thing that should come out of someone's mouth is, cool, when are we building the nuclear power plants? Because that is the cleanest burning fuel on the planet. It is. If you want to bitch and moan about fossil fuels, that's fine. Now explain to me why we don't have power plants going up in their place. I'll wait.
Various town needs in the past. However, it soon became apparent that the accumulated trash was taking up more
Nick
space
has talked
than
about it
anticipated.
extensively,
In
Robin.
response, the council decided...
Leo, hydro is okay. It's still not as efficient, and I do think there's still pollutants. And as far as wind power, unfortunately, the technology with wind power is not viable as a replacement. There's wind power wind power is not a reliable replacement because you would need to have consistent wind on the windmills. The windmills themselves are very expensive, and the windmills apparently tend to break frequently. At any given time at a windmill farm, usually you're seeing about half the windmills are not working. So unfortunately, if you wanted to set up like a personal windmill or solar panels for your home as a supplement, that's certainly good to go. I remember seeing a video a while back about someone that basically did they lined their roof with solar panels to try and go off grid as much as possible, and it was a very viable solution on a personal basis. On a widespread basis, for a generalized infrastructure basis, it's not viable. It cannot generate enough electrical power to work as infrastructure based. So, unfortunately not. For your home, sure, it'd be good. But that's about it.
That the best course of action was to burn the garbage in the pit, the same year they began using it. 1962. While today we recognize the dangers of burning trash, including the release of toxic fumes that can lead to respiratory problems, cancer, and widespread environmental pollution, this awareness developed slowly over the latter half of the 20th century. Even now, in some rural areas of the United States, it's not unusual for people to disregard regulations and burn whatever waste they choose to on their own properties. So, at the time, burning trash didn't seem like a major issue. Unfortunately, it wasn't just this act, but rather a separate and far more serious mistake that would turn a local garbage problem into something oh so much worse. By law, abandoned underground mining areas are required to have their entrances sealed off with non-combustible shale barrier. This measure not only helps prevent the spread of contaminated water and dangerous gases into nearby interconnected mines, but also protects the surrounding environment. However, before the establishment of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, or MSHA, in 1977, oversight of the mining industry was the responsibility of the Bureau of Mines, an agency that was often underfunded, understaffed, and less organized compared to its successor. As a result, the early years of mining were marked by frequent accidents.
Oh, really, Steve? The thing with Spain is because of an over-reliance on solar and wind. Well, yeah, like I said, that technology is simply not suitable for infrastructure power. Yeah.
Numerous fatalities and a widespread failure to properly seal or document abandoned mine sites. In states like Pennsylvania and Utah, outdoor enthusiasts still occasionally fall into or get lost in these forgotten tunnels, which remain scattered across the landscape. Centralia was no exception. Near the town's chosen location for the town's garbage burning pit, a neglected 15-foot deep hole left behind from earlier underground mining activity remained open and unnoticed. It's believed that when the garbage fire was set, flames spread to nearby carbon-rich waste and then made their way into this previously overlooked mine shaft. Once the fire reached the coal-filled underground tunnels, a network of interconnected seams and abandoned mining operations running beneath the town, it was already too late. Unbeknownst to the people of Centralia, a relentless underground fire had begun burning directly beneath their homes, driveways, churches, and businesses. Life on the surface continued as usual, while below, the town was quite literally starting to fall apart.
Oh, God.
While one might assume that a situation like this would demand immediate action, mine fires like this one were, and still are, remarkably common across Pennsylvania. As a result, many are simply left to burn out on their own, since the costs and risks of extinguishing them often outweigh the potential benefits. That said, some early efforts were made to smother the fire using water, clay, and other materials. These attempts largely failed, however, and with limited resources stretched thin by several more severe fires elsewhere in the state, most of these efforts were just eventually abandoned. Additionally, few people anticipated just how quickly and widely the fire would spread, assuming it was relatively contained. Life above ground continued much as it always had, with many local mines even remaining open for work. However, within just a few months, on August 9, 1962, carbon monoxide was detected in Centralia's mines, forcing the remaining ones to be shut down and abruptly cutting off the town's primary source of employment. Despite the setback, many residents chose to stay, either hopeful that the situation would eventually be resolved or determined to keep the town alive through other means. Unfortunately, though, this became increasingly difficult as the underground fire worsened, continuing to spread from mine to mine beneath the town. In 1979, the owner of a local gas station became curious about whether and how the underground fires were impacting the gasoline stored beneath the property. After testing the fuel, they discovered it was 100 Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius hotter than normal. While this temperature wasn't high enough to pose an immediate safety risk, it gave the remaining residents a sobering glimpse into the severity of what was happening below ground.
Yeah, that's a bomb waiting to go off.
Government officials regularly conducted temperature checks on the fire itself, consistently recording readings over 1,000 Fahrenheit or 538 Celsius, with the highest ever recorded reaching 1,300 Fahrenheit or 704 Celsius. Although many residents of Centralia chose to stay, the consequences of the fire extended far beyond the mines. As local journalist David DeCock described,
Rygat, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Does anybody know? Hang on. I can look it up really quick. Hang on. Let's see. Last point of gasoline is, why is it minus 45? Auto ignition temperature is 280 degrees Celsius. That's what apparently the auto ignition temperature is for gasoline. Yeah.
in his
Is it?
1986
Yeah,
book,
685
Unseen
Fahrenheit.
Danger,
Yeah.
residents often endured, quote, burning eyes, the taste of sulfur, and an acrid odor accompanied by headaches, lassitude, and respiratory troubles. In the 80s, however, the situation...
Wait! So chat, the residents of this town were literally getting black lung without actually being in the mine. I'm reasonably certain. I am reasonably certain that these symptoms are similar to black lung because of the smoke. So it's not only CO2, it's just the toxic fumes from burning coal. I think, like, yoo-hoo. And they're still choosing to stay. Oh, it is, Imperial. Like, black lung is the #1 killer of miners. That is the #1 disease. And like and this is also going to lead to cancers. No, no, Tanito, I fully appreciate carbon monoxide is more dangerous. I fully appreciate that. But based on the burning eyes, like carbon monoxide doesn't necessarily cause the burning of eyes, taste of sulfur, an acrid odor with headaches. Headaches kind of is. The last two then respiratory troubles. The respiratory could be. But don't forget, carbon monoxide is odorless and tasteless. The burning eyes, the sulfur, and the acrid odor makes me think of black lung. That is what makes me think it's black lung and not simply carbon monoxide.
However, the situation in Centralia deteriorated further as more
Yeah,
coal
they did,
seams
Rebin.
burned out, destabilizing the ground beneath the streets and leading to the sudden appearance of sinkholes throughout the town. In 1981, one such sinkhole nearly claimed the life of 12-year-old Todd Domboski.
Wait, really? Mechanic, really? How far from Centralia are you? And like, welcome, you picked a perfect fucking time. Welcome in. Have you ever actually like ventured over to Centralia to basically witness what's still happening there? I'm really curious. Like, how is it that people that come into my chat has been to stuff that we watch in my videos? We've had people that know about beard stuff. We've got people that that were involved in some historical whose families were involved in historical World War II things. We've got people that know about Centralia. I mean, yeah. Thank you, Sketty. Llama, I guess so. I guess I put out the siren call and I didn't even know it.
Running through a local yard, the ground suddenly gave way beneath him.
Fortunately, 40 minutes I once visited the mining museum.
Onto a nearby tree root and held on until help arrived.
Hang on.
Fortunately, Todd managed to grab onto a nearby tree root and held on until help arrived to pull him to safety. Although he escaped unharmed, the incident attracted national attention and raised both public concern and legislative demands for a permanent solution to Centralia's seemingly unstoppable fire.
Oh,
Between
no.
1962 and 1983, as previously noted, several attempts were made to extinguish.
It's the two dreaded words you hear from the government. Eminent domain. Otherwise known as the government legally kicking you out of your home and saying, bye, go find somewhere else to live. No, not sentence, just 2 words. Yes, the most frightening sentence is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I was talking about the 2 dreaded words, not sentence.
Or control the fire, with approximately $7 million allocated during that period. This amount included funds for relocation assistance for residents who chose to leave. However, after Todd Dombolski's near-death experience, state officials began to take the situation much more seriously and started exploring the possibility of fully extinguishing the fire. By 1984, estimates suggested that the cost of putting out the fire would be around $660 million. That's over $2 billion today.
Okay. Side tangent. How ironic would it have been if this number actually was 666 million? How fitting would that have been if that would have been the cost to put out the fire? the hellscape of fire. If the cost was 666. If that number had popped up on screen, I might have laughed. That would have got me to laugh.
This was staggering compared to the mere $50,000 it would have cost to address the issues back in 1962 had the proper means been available at the time. Given the overwhelming cost of a viable solution to the fire, many officials concluded that it made more sense to abandon the town entirely rather than attempt to save it. As a result, Congress passed a $42 million bill aimed at helping the remaining families relocate. Surprisingly, however, only about half the families accepted the assistance, while the rest chose to stay in Centralia, remaining in the homes they'd known their entire lives.
Oh my God.
Despite the ongoing health risks.
Yeah.
For a time.
Honestly, that doesn't surprise me. That honestly doesn't surprise me that some people refuse to leave. You can call it stupidity all you want, and sometimes justifiably so. But for some people, it's like this is the only home that they've ever known. And the danger might not have been quite so visible to them. There was the one child that nearly fell, but other than that, I don't think that there was not a direct threat that they could see that was imminent that would encourage them, that would evoke the natural human response to flee from danger. And because there was not that clear visual threat, they're like, this is my home. I'm not going anywhere because I don't actually see a danger. And, that's just, for some, that's just human nature.
Allowed them to remain, likely hoping that the remaining residents would eventually reconsider their decision and leave the hazardous area voluntarily. By 1992, the state of Pennsylvania had lost patience. It declared eminent domain over the entire town of Centralia, condemning all remaining buildings and effectively rendering anyone who stayed behind a squatter. A decade later, the town's zip code was officially revoked, unincorporating Centralia and transferring postal services to nearby Ashland. Despite the declaration of eminent domain, a small group of residents remained and attempted to challenge the state's decision through legal means, but they were ultimately unsuccessful. Nevertheless, for more than a decade afterward, Pennsylvania chose not to enforce evictions, allowing the remaining residents to stay in Centralia despite the legal and environmental risks.
My guess is a strong majority of those residents that stayed were probably elderly. If I was to hazard a guess, they were most likely elderly, set in their ways, and they're probably like, I've lived here for 50 years, 60 years, not too old to move, Leo, too old to want to move. Exactly. They were like, you know what? I'm old. I'm gonna die soon anyway. This has been my home for 50 years. This is my family home. It has been my home for 50 years. I'm gonna die here. I don't fucking care. It doesn't matter to me. That is my suspicion, because with some of these old folks, especially, like, basically they are effectively like country folk. Even though it's up in Pennsylvania, this is still essentially like the country folk mindset, where tradition and homestead almost means more than safety. And it was their home. They didn't want to leave it. They were probably too long for the world anyway. And it's just, I don't care if I die. I'm going to die in my home, in my bed.
But that changed in 2009, when then-Governor Ed Rendell decided enough was enough and initiated formal evictions of the remaining residents. Yet even this effort fell short. Despite Rendell's actions, 5 homes were still occupied, and the families living in them once again took legal action against the state, this time alleging they were victims of massive fraud. According to these residents, the state's true motive wasn't public safety or concern about the fire, but rather a desire to access the rare coal beneath the town. They claimed the government was using the fire as a pretext to seize the land. However, these legal challenges were ultimately unsuccessful as well. In 2012, the courts ruled, once again, ordering the remaining residents to vacate. By 2013, the state of Pennsylvania finally acknowledged the futility of its efforts. State and local officials reached an agreement with the remaining families. They'd be allowed to stay in their homes and retain ownership for the rest of their lives. However, upon their passing, the properties would revert to government ownership under the previously declared eminent domain.
Interesting.
Today, only 5 residents remain in a town whose underbelly has been burning for over 60 years. This is despite
people
numerous
still live
government
there.
interventions, severe health risks, and the total absence of any other civilization for miles around. Visitors to this eerily haunting ghost town will find streets that are mostly intact except for the occasional sinkhole or fissure where steam ominously rises from the earth. A few houses still stand, along with long-forgotten graveyards, an abandoned church, scorched patches of vegetation, and driveways that lead to empty, overgrown lots. It's got enough haunting cliches to make your skin crawl, and it's no surprise that many believe that Centralia inspired the setting for the previously mentioned video game Silent Hill. Unsurprisingly, the town has become a roadside attraction for curious passers-by, drawn either by its eerie pop culture legacy or by the infamous underground fire. Although the fire itself remains hidden beneath the surface, the ghost town alone has been enough to lure visitors for decades. One stretch of Route 61, which cuts through Centralia, was closed in the early 1990s due to subterranean instability, and it became a particular hotspot. Tourists flocked to the area, leaving behind layers of spray-painted messages and artwork that...
Did that literally say only speak the language of a lettuce? Okay, is this some kind of fucking boomer thing of only speak the language of a lettuce? Like, what the fuck does that even mean? You think it's an anagram? LSD, maybe. That's entirely possible. Wait, is the lettuce part a code for it? Yeah, Mom, is it speak only the language of the weed? The ganja? Is that what that is? Okay, that clever.
Of spray-painted messages and artwork that eventually earned it the nickname the Graffiti Highway. Over time, this stretch transformed into an attraction in its own right. However, in 2020, officials moved to shut it down for good, covering the road with dirt mounds to block public access. Although the fire is invisible from the surface, it continues to be closely monitored by officials to this day. More than 2,000 boreholes have been drilled throughout the Centralia region to aid in surveillance, and the state conducts visual inspections on a monthly basis. Experts estimate that the underground fire, which originally began in a small mining pit, has now spread across more than 400 surface acres and could potentially expand to as many as 3,700. However, this shouldn't be imagined as a single massive blaze engulfing the entire area. Instead, it comprises a network of scattered fires burning beneath the ground. Interestingly, surface mining in the region has actually helped slow the fire's progression. By strip mining, crews remove coal deposits from deep underground, effectively limiting the fuel available for the fire to spread. Despite ongoing concerns, the fire continues to advance, reportedly moving about 50 to 75 feet, that's 15 to 23 meters each year. Officials have confirmed that it has already spread several miles south beneath the now-abandoned town of Burnsville, and they believe it is likely extended beyond the Buck Mountain coal bed into those of neighboring mountains. With no active efforts underway to extinguish the blaze, experts estimate that it could keep burning for at least another century. While Centralia's fire is undoubtedly the most infamous mine fire in the United States, it might not even be the largest in Pennsylvania. In fact, it's just one of roughly 40 active mine fires across the state, some believed to be even older and more expansive than Centralia's, despite its notoriety.
Holy
On a global scale, underground mine fires are surprisingly common, with thousands potentially burning simultaneously around the world at any given time. Unfortunately, this points to a much deeper issue: the consequences of reckless mining practices. When safety and sustainability are pushed aside in the relentless pursuit of resources, we not only endanger the environment, but we also put human lives at risk and squander the very materials we set out to extract in the first place.
So it's potentially even worse than just this one fire. That's fucking scary. That is really fucking scary. Well, I know what my nightmare's gonna be tonight.